Ooh, I feel like I'm sitting with homeschool royalty.
Oh, you guys just spoil me.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Again, thank you for asking me to participate.
My pleasure.
You guys are all so sweet. You're all such young, wise moms. You guys, I'm just old and
That's such a lie. And she's humble. My name is Melissa Brannon. I bring you stories of homeschool moms from all over the country and their journey that they've spent homeschooling. And today I am super excited to sit down with my friend, Mrs. Evans. Her name is Yvette, but we call her Mrs. Evans. She is homeschool royalty in our circle of friends because she has the Midas touch with everything she touches for her kids in homeschooling. She's got a really amazing pack of children, and I'm super excited to hear what she has to share with us today. Okay, well, introduce us to your family.
So my husband Daryl and I, we've been married for 28 years. We just celebrated our anniversary this month. And we've been blessed with 8 living children. And we have 2 angels with the Lord. And our kids range from age 27 all the way down to age 7. So we have a 7-year gap. And we have a daughter, Lydia, and then we have 5 boys: Joseph, Isaiah, Elijah, Solomon, Nathan. And finally, 14 years after Lydia, the Lord blessed us with a second girl, Miss Tabitha. And then we had Miss Phoebe, our youngest. So that's our family, and we've been homeschooling now for we just finished our 18th year. We started homeschooling when our oldest was in 4th grade. So the older 2 had a little bit of public school, but the rest so far have all been homeschooled, and we've graduated 4. We call them the original 4, and then our younger 4, we call them the final 4.
That's super cute.
Yes, they like to say they're the best 4.
Is there a large gap between the first 4 and the second 4, or it's just?
Yes, between number 4 and number 5, it's about 4 years.
And is that the biggest gap you have?
Actually, no, the younger 2, there's a 5-year gap.
Okay.
So yes, Tabitha's 12 and Phoebe's 7 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I did not realize that your olders had gone to public school.
Yes.
So
yeah, we moved to Sacramento from the Bay Area. So while we were in the Bay Area, we were in a school district that, I was very happy with, and I was always volunteering. So I was pretty involved in their schooling. And when we made the decision to move here, we had planned to enroll in public school. And we had heard about year-round school, and we just thought, oh, that's going to be awesome. We'll get on a track, and they'll have 1 month off. And we like to vacation with the kids, so we thought we'd always vacation during that 1 month. It wasn't until we moved that we realized, oh, we don't get to pick what month we get off. And they're not all going to be on the same track.
Oh.
And it turned out they weren't even at the same school.
Oh.
So then we started rethinking. And
so you're going to have to take, even though they were all like within the same age range, you were going to have to take them to different schools, like multiple elementary schools and multiple.
Yeah, for us, the way it worked out, we would have to have 2 of them at one school, and then 1 would have to be bused to another school because they didn't have openings. Yeah, and we hadn't anticipated that, and because we had a kindergartner and then a 2nd grader and a 4th grader, the kindergarten would start school at a different time, and because the 2nd grader would be at a different school, his school started at a different time. Oh, so they had 3 start times, 3 end times, 2 different schools. So yeah, it wasn't the ideal situation that we had envisioned. And they couldn't guarantee that they would be on the same track, so it was a possibility they could end up on different tracks, and there wasn't any guarantee from year to year that they would be on the same track. So the more we thought about it, we just said, you know what, we had some friends who mentioned homeschooling when we were in the Bay Area, and it turned out where we were worshiping, there were 3 other families who were homeschooling. And we said, you know what, let's check out this homeschooling. And the more we learned about it, the more we said we'd be willing to give it a try. We just felt like the Lord was kind of leading us that way. And I figured kindergarten, second grade, I can't really mess that up that much, so I think I can do that. But it turned out our fourth grader, our oldest, she was the most studious at the time, and she took her education very seriously. And she had some concerns about homeschooling, so we decided, well, we'll let her go to public school, and since it's just one kid, one schedule, one school, I could do that.
Sure.
So that first trimester, she was in public school and I was homeschooling, and it worked. And when she had that 1 month off, she got to see what we did at home.
Oh.
And it was really neat because she was asking questions. And she would say things like, if I homeschool, can I study, learn about China for history? I'm like, sure, if that's what you want to learn, that would be great. And then another day she'd say, and if I wanted to work on my math problems longer, I could do that. And I'm like, yeah. And if I wanted to read ahead in my reading, I could do that. And I'm like, of course, if you wanted to do that. And later I learned these were things that at school she wasn't able to do.
Sure, yeah.
She wanted to spend more time with math, that her math group would move ahead before she was ready.
Right.
She wanted to move ahead in reading, but her math group wasn't ready, so she had to hold back.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what they were studying in history, but for some reason she wanted to study China.
That was important to her.
But then I think the final experience at home was choir. We went to choir. There was a homeschool choir, and when she saw the songs and the production and the drama and all of that, she was like, Mommy, can I try homeschooling? And I was like, oh, yes, you can. So we enrolled her in our homeschool, and she didn't go back. Yeah, so it was great. But even though she spent that first trimester at public school, we supported her, and, you know, she was able to do that. And I think it helped that she didn't feel like she was being pressured and had to do homeschooling.
Yeah, that's what I think. She made the choice for herself, so she got to feel like it was really like it was her choice, even though it was your choice. You know, it was what you wanted for her. It allowed her the ownership to make a choice for herself. Now you homeschool independent, right? So in California we have the option to charter, but you've never chartered. You've always been independent.
Well, we've always participated in a PSP.
Okay.
So typically it operates like a school. They have an administrative staff that takes all of the students' names and parents' names, and you're registered with the state as a school, and it's a private school. And so I think it may stand for private school
affidavit.
Right. They submit your affidavit, and it's considered a school by the state standards.
Okay.
And they meet all the requirements. So I don't have to do that paperwork.
Okay.
We pay a membership, and that's like our tuition, and it covers the administrative costs.
Okay.
And then
so instead of you doing the paperwork to file with the state, they file it for you?
That's right.
Do they take care of your attendance as well?
Somewhat. I keep attendance, but I'm required to provide them my attendance and report cards at the end of the year, and it goes into the student's QM file.
Yeah.
And
do you have to provide work samples to them as well?
We do.
Okay.
Yes. And we attend meetings. I think it's a requirement as a private school program. You attend at least 2 meetings a year, and at the meetings we receive information, forms, and we get to meet with the representative to answer questions. And there's usually any updates on state laws, they share that. So it's very helpful because I feel like I have that accountability.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I kind of have the freedom to still choose the children's curriculum based on their learning style and what they need. And the PSP helps me meet all of the requirements for graduation when that time comes.
Yeah.
When the students are in high school. So it's really nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And depending on the PSP, from year to year, you may have some parents who volunteer to teach a class, and we can sign up. And they're really good about letting us know what other resources are available in our area.
Yeah.
So it's worked for us as a family.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask how much you pay?
No, I don't mind. I think it's always averaged around 300. It's probably up to 350 now, which is for our whole family.
Okay.
So I find that reasonable. And then that cost may be also if you have a senior in the family, because there's a few more requirements when you have seniors, but it may go up. Well, it definitely goes up when you have a student who's graduating.
Okay.
But that's roughly the cost.
So why did you, because it sounds a lot like a charter school, because you know, they do the attendance for you and they do the tracking of your paperwork and your work samples. Why did you opt to go that route instead of going for a charter school? Because your route you had to pay for, as where a charter school gives you funding available for your students. So I'm curious why you went with one over the other.
Well, to be honest, the families I mentioned that mentored us in the beginning, that's what they did, and they shared how it worked, and it sounded great to me. So I just kind of followed their example. And then secondly, we wanted to provide a Christian education for our kids, and I knew I wanted curriculum that would also, you know, relate to the Bible. And it was my understanding that with a charter school, you're limited in terms of your curriculum options and how much religion you can share during your school day.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to have any restrictions in that area. So I felt, you know, the Lord blessed us to be able to afford to cover the cost for the PSP. So that, for my husband and I, we decided it would be the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that we could have that freedom to provide a Christian education.
Yeah, and not have to answer to anybody for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And not have to, you know, pick and choose my curriculum when I could use it, or, you know, it just felt like there were some limitations in that regard. So I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah.
So it worked.
If you're not familiar with independent versus a charter school, check out down below in the show notes. I'm going to link a video there, and it talks about the difference between homeschooling independent and homeschooling charter, and it'll touch on. It touches on the restrictions and the limitations, and what each allows you and what each doesn't allow you, and so that way you can get an idea of maybe what works best for your family if those are options for you. So.
That's good. Yeah.
When you were starting off, did you have a particular learning style or direction that you went with your education, or did you just kind of pick and choose what you felt worked for your family, or how did you get started? I guess, how did you start on your journey when you started homeschooling? You're deciding what you wanted to school with.
I remember asking other families, particularly those that I worship with, and I knew what they were doing, and so I kind of started out trying to do the same thing that they were doing. So I remember ordering a few curriculums and using that. I also had an idea of some of the things I wanted to do, so reading was really important to me. So I just, especially with my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old, our schooling consisted of just a lot of reading together and then doing some writing and some math, kind of keeping it really simple. And when my daughter started school with this, I realized, okay, I need to do a little bit more, since she was used to having more, you know, history and science. And so I tried different curriculums, and I actually enjoyed the curriculum end of it, so I started getting all kinds of catalogs. And I have a garage full of curriculum still. So yeah.
You have your own lending library in your garage?
Oh, I do. Yes, for sure. And I personally wanted to be a teacher, and I studied child development and early childhood education. So some of this was just something that was already innate, and I was already, when my older two were in public school, actively involved in schooling with them and making sure they did their homework and things like that. So some of that just kind of, I think, naturally spilled over into homeschooling. I was a more, I would say, traditional school mom, where we were up at a certain time and I had their schoolwork laid out, and I would plan my lessons in advance. Sometimes I was making them myself, because that was something I was doing when I was a kid. I would play school. So a lot of that part I had fun with. And again, because it was something that was just an interest of mine, I just kind of found a way to use other curriculum to supplement my idea of schooling. But over time, it definitely changed when I got to know my kids' strengths and their challenged areas, and I realized, okay, I can't just do it the normal way and more the way I was schooled. I had to find out how they learned best. So then that started to change my curriculum choices, and I had to explore more options. And thankfully, there was a nice community of homeschooling moms, and we would talk and we'd share stories. And I learned from other moms who had gone before me and had a child with similar challenges that one of my kids had. And they would share what they used, and I would order that, and I gave it a try. And I would attend homeschool conventions and workshops, and there was always a lot of information there, and I would learn more about, again, my children's learning styles and what curriculum was available for that. And so I would look for that and just try different things to find what worked for my kiddos.
Yeah.
And it worked out. Some years were easier than others. And I remember one mom in particular who had multiple kids like we did. And she shared a curriculum with me, the PACES. It's by Accelerated Christian Education. And that was a lifesaver. It was a very simplistic curriculum, and I didn't have to buy like a whole lot of different options, and it kind of gave me a little stability, because for a while I felt like I wasn't, getting the hang of this, and it was starting to be a little bit more when we were like into our second year. That curriculum really helped me bring me back to my center and help me focus on what was really important, because I think you can easily get caught up in all the different curriculum, and it just all sounds great and you want your kids to have the best. And I went back to just, the basics, and this curriculum kept it centered on the Word of God, which is what we wanted our focus to be. And they were learning, and also kind of learning to own their education more. The way this curriculum was designed, it helped them to learn to work independently, but check in with me. So it made it more manageable for both of us, or for each of my kids. And I finally learned a routine, like how to rotate them, especially when the other babies started coming. And I definitely...
How to give a little bit of your time to each one.
Right.
That is a real struggle.
Yeah.
I still struggle with that.
Yeah. And I think I went through some growing pains for myself, because there's a lot on us moms to try and balance, the family, the schooling, and just home. And especially when you have little ones who demand a lot. So I definitely feel like I was blessed to go through some things where I realized we're homeschooling, so my kids are still getting an education, even if we're not doing reading, writing, math 6 hours a day.
Right.
But we're still taking care of home. That's a life lesson, and they're developing life skills at the same time, which was one of our goals. So I had to learn to be okay with that.
Right.
And it worked out.
You mentioned the PACES curriculum. I was curious around what age your kids were when you started on that.
That's a good question. I think probably they were 6th grade, 4th grade, and 2nd grade.
Okay.
Probably when, the original 4, when that 4th one started kindergarten, and realizing, okay, they're each at different levels now, and still needing time with me. Because at some point I was able to do certain things together. Yeah. But as they started, getting older, it's like you realize you can't continue to still do, or at least for me, I couldn't keep doing phonics with, my 4th grader is like, okay, she's reading now, she doesn't have to do that. But yeah, so I think it was around that time, because then she was able to start doing more on her own.
Yeah.
And
their needs just became so different that you had to find something. So I've actually never heard of PACES. Can you just give me an overview of what the curriculum is a little bit?
Sure. The way they describe it, and I remember best, is they take a textbook and they break it down into packets. So each chapter is a packet, and each packet has a scripture verse that they focus on and want to memorize throughout the PACE. And they're on the very first page, it has the goals that will be achieved when they complete the PACE.
Of that packet or the whole?
Of the packet.
Okay.
Yeah, so each packet. And so it breaks it down into smaller steps, basically. And
they break it when you order, let's say, history. Are you ordering a year's worth of history and then it breaks it down for the year, the booklets for the year?
You have that option. The other aspect of this curriculum that I really like is they offer diagnostic testing. And when your child takes that, if there's any gaps, it'll identify those gaps and you can purchase just those PACES.
Oh, interesting. So you can purchase just those books?
Yes. And it'll also, with the diagnostic, identify at what point your child is ready to start with the curriculum without any gaps.
Nice.
So and I've had to do this, I'll have my children do the gaps.
Yeah.
And then we'll start at the point that they recommend. And then I can order the packets. And they will provide them like at the beginning of the year, the whole 12 packets. And you can go through that.
Okay, that was my next question. It's how many packets are there?
Yes,
for a
there's 12
year.
packets.
So 12 per year. Okay.
And what I have found works well too is the diagnostic. You can do that any time of the year. So I've actually sometimes, when they're finished with their gaps, I'll have them do the diagnostic again just to see, how they did.
Make sure that those gaps were filled in.
Right. And then sometimes with the gaps, they acquired enough learning that they are ready to go beyond where the first diagnostic said they should start.
Oh, nice.
So sometimes I can, based on that, order their curriculum a little further down the line than the original diagnostic suggested.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and even when I've used other curriculum, I still go back to that diagnostic, just because I think it's a good indicator of, how my kids are doing. So the Accelerated Christian Education is the site, and the curriculum, they call them PACES.
Okay.
So, I don't know if it stands for Packets of Accelerated Christian Education, but yes, that's what we call them.
So now I'm totally curious, because we met through Classical Conversations, which your oldest is still doing, right? Solomon is doing, and Nathan is doing, but your younger two are not doing.
Actually, they're doing it. Oh, I'm sorry, no. So Solomon isn't doing it.
Okay.
So our older four, I didn't know about classical conversations, so my older four didn't do that.
Okay. Did they do PACE all the way through graduation?
Not all the way through, because eventually around middle school, high school, we were in our groove with them, and again, I like them to start owning their education, so we started trying to find curriculum that suited their interests and their strengths, and wherever they needed help, I would try to have them help me find the curriculum that would work with them best.
Yeah.
But in the early, elementary school age, I liked using the PACES with the older four.
Yeah.
We were introduced to classical conversations when our younger four were schooling, and it has worked well for the final four. I noticed that again when my kids hit high school, they're really kind of starting to own their education and pursue interests that they have. We've done 2 years with the classical conversations program for high school, and then the last 2 years I like them to continue to take classes at the junior college, which is what we did with our older four.
Okay.
So they're doing that dual credit.
Dual enrollment?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the areas that I'm really passionate about when we started homeschooling was just being able to discover what our kids' natural talents are and what their gifts, God has given them. So the last 2 years of high school, I try to really help them look more into that so that when they graduate, they'll have an idea of, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm good at, and what kind of careers
are available in that.
Right.
Yeah.
So having them take classes at the junior college, I think also helps them start experiencing what higher education would be like if they decide to do that. And if they're interested in something, taking a class in that field and getting a little taste of it to see if it's really what they want to do. And just kind of helping them to gauge, well, how well are you doing with this learning? You know, if you have to take a class with another instructor, and especially in a college setting, are you ready for that? And it's worked well. Our older four, they each did that, and it was satisfying to see that they could handle the work at a junior college, and that they have learned how to read, write, and do math well enough to do a junior college course. So I think it helped with that transitioning from homeschooling to higher education, and again learning what they wanted to do, what they were interested in.
I love that, and it sounds like it's kind of it kind of wades them into the pool of life as opposed to just walking through the edge and then going, okay.
Yeah, that analogy, yes, exactly. And it was good to have them at home still as they dealt with some of those things.
Yeah.
And it was a learning process for my husband and I too. Of course, some things we wish now we could have done differently with the older four, but God has blessed us to learn from that, and hopefully, we got four more.
You can't drop that though, and not share your this is some of the mistakes we made, and this is what we would have done differently. So,
sure, that's fair. I think for us, just it's a personal thing. Communication. I really feel like my husband and I could have done a better job communicating to our kids that while yes, you're making these choices and decisions as an adult on your own, but Dad and I are still here, and even though we may not always agree with your choices, it doesn't mean you can't still talk to us about it. So I think somewhere we should have done a better job of communicating with our kids that yes, this is your responsibility, this is your education, these are your choices, and you're older now, you get to do this, but Dad and Mom are still here to help you out.
Yeah.
So communicating that better and continuing to offer them information to consider and being more of that coach, which I'm learning you're supposed to do as a parent. At some age, you're supposed to stop being your parent, telling them what to do.
I don't know. I spoke with a friend of mine, Melissa, another Melissa, who said, I thought that once they went to college it would get easier, and I feel like it got harder because the conversations evolved into so much bigger things, and they needed my attention to have those conversations. She goes, I thought we get to, senior and be done, and she's like, no, it was not like that at all.
Right. Yeah, I agree that you definitely still need to talk and be available, but I learned it was a little different because now you're waiting for them to initiate it versus just putting it out there.
Right.
And I remember being that age too, and I try to, I thought for some reason my kids would be different because I wasn't my parent. My parents, and I'm just.
What are you talking about? You knew everything at that age.
Exactly. So yeah, that was definitely eye-opening. That okay, they're adults and they are going to have, different ideas and want to do things differently, and I have to respect that, and I have to be willing to wait for them to invite me to participate in their choices or their decision making, but still finding a way to communicating. If that's what if you want that, Mom and Dad are here.
Yeah.
And trying to again emphasize that we may not always agree, but that doesn't mean we're not still rooting for you. Right.
Yeah.
We're still here for you. We still are invested in your success.
Yeah.
And
you're not hoping for their failure just because they didn't pick what you wanted for them.
Yeah. And I remember having some tough conversations telling our kids, we're not the enemy. We're on your team. We're still rooting for you. Even though, we might think you should go a different route to achieve that goal.
Yeah.
Let's not stop communicating just because.
Or forget that we're all here for the same cause.
Right. And just being, because I guess I took it for granted that they knew we were rooting for them, that they knew we wanted to be there for them, and that we, are on their side, and that we were still invested in their success. So I'm trying to do a better job now of reminding our Final Four and reestablishing that understanding with our older four, that no, mom and dad still want what's best for you. You're not going to find anyone other than, God, who wants to see you succeed and be the best that you can be. So, that's something that I definitely think was a bit of a challenge that we had to deal with. But,
and you learned from it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're still learning. Still learning. So, and there's a lot of growth and education for parents when you homeschool.
Oh, yeah. Personal growth and family growth, and that's
for sure. And that's a good thing, I think, that comes from homeschooling, because I feel like when they were in school I was involved, but I know my kids. I know their learning styles. I know what their challenges are, and I think because we homeschooled, I learned a lot more about them than I would have if, I didn't have that opportunity to be so involved and engaged in their education. And I know they know as well, because it was something that we did together.
Yeah.
We tried to make it something so they could own their education as well. And so that's good when I see them making those choices for themselves based on what they know about themselves. I think that's a good thing for them to have that there.
Well, the trust has also been built up there to have those conversations, because you've spent so many years building that trusted communication with them, that they know that they can trust to come to you and have those conversations, that you'll understand where they're coming from, and you'll understand their journey in such a deeper level, because you've been there for it. You've been in the trenches with them the whole time.
Yeah, I must say though that I think, and every parent's different. I just recently learned at a practicum for a CC that how we react to our children makes a big difference. And I was one of those parents. I'm very guilty that I think I overreacted with my kids. And kids will make mistakes, and things happen. But my husband and I both, I think we were just always overreacting to our kids, like, oh goodness, I can't tell mom or dad.
So what you can't see is my daughter is off camera going,
uh-oh. And oh my goodness, I
had an overreactive moment yesterday.
Oh, really?
Where I definitely acted bigger than the problem warranted at the time.
Yeah, that's just something it never occurred to me.
Yeah.
Until I was sitting at that practicum, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been guilty of that since we started homeschooling. Mm-hmm. So that might explain some of it too. My kids know what they can talk to me about and what they can't. And even some of them,
they're like, is it worth the reaction to come to them?
and some of them are so funny, because they're like, Mom, on second thought, I'm gonna go talk to Dad. And that's what I know. Oh,
okay. Oh, really?
Because he's so much more like, whatever, with certain things.
They let it filter through Dad to you.
Yeah. So I'm still learning, and I'm sure, there were times where it would have even worked out better if I had learned this years past. But I'm glad and thankful that I've learned it now, and I'm trying to do better with the Final Four.
Are there any other hurdles in their education that stick out to you other than the communication?
Well, I know a couple of my kids had some learning difficulties, and those were rough
patches.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it was very beneficial to have a community with other moms that I could talk to and share stories. And so there was one mom in particular who really blessed me by sharing some curriculum regarding right brain learning. And I had a child who just was having a difficult time reading, and this particular curriculum got us through that rough patch. And I had to devote daily 3 hours for just that child.
Wow.
And nothing but reading. But I realized it was worth it because all of his learning, you have to know how to read. And if he wasn't reading, then he was going to struggle. So taking out those 3 hours, and we did that for probably 6 months, and I sacrificed even the 3 hours with my other kids. I had to,
that time had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, but it was definitely worth it, and it was a joyful time as well because he was discovering things that he could do that I even was not aware he couldn't do.
Yeah.
And one example was tying his shoe. I remember we had been doing the curriculum for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and he's like, "Mommy, I can tie my shoe." And it was one of those, right, left coordinating things.
Yeah.
And this was a kid who never learned to crawl. So he never got that coordination, and that all had to do with the whole right brain, left brain thing. But the exercises we were doing with this curriculum was helping him get that coordination, and he was able to finally tie his shoe. And he was 8 years old. And I hadn't realized, you don't know how to tie your shoe. But I guess we were doing the Velcro thing. So I was like, oh, yeah, the shoes on, we're good. So, yeah.
How did you know? Was it just because he wasn't reading? I mean, what drew you to the right brain, left brain?
Well, that was probably the conversation I was having with my friend. And I was just describing for her, I noticed he would have trouble reading a word at the top of the page, and I'd give him the word, and he'd see that word again in the middle of the page, and he had forgotten it, and I'd give it to him again. And then if it came up at the end of the page, he still couldn't remember what the word was. And that was unusual. I had at this point helped, 3 other children learn to read, and so for him to have this kind of challenge, I felt like something was going on.
Yeah.
But we just kept at it and kept at it, and it was just such a struggle. And I was sharing that with my friend, and she mentioned, oh, I had the same issue with my son, and this is what we did. And so for about 2 years, we were really struggling to get him to read, and I was using the same curriculum, Hooked on Phonics, with him that I had used with the other children, but it just wasn't clicking for him.
Yeah.
And I think the Lord knew, and I did a lot of praying in my homeschooling, still do.
Yes.
And God just always, his timing, he would, send the right person with a similar situation and offer that advice. Or I even sometimes overhear other moms talking about something, and I'd be like, oh, excuse me.
Your ears will perk up and be like, oh wait, this sounds like something I need to listen to.
And like I said, I love searching curriculum, so I was always going online and just putting in information, and I still do this today, that if my kids are interested in something, I go online and try to find a curriculum that will suit them.
Yeah.
That I think is very helpful, being an advocate for your child, being your child's personal curriculum advisor and counselor in education.
How do you said you get online and you'll look for a curriculum that suits their style or their learning. With there being so much out there, how do you sort through it? Because I get overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I think for me, cost is a factor.
Certainly.
I will narrow it down. I'm like, oh, that's not in my budget. But then also, I think reading up on it and seeing what others are saying about it, it helps. And if I know someone who's used it, I find that a little bit more trustworthy. And then I'm willing to try. Like I said, have a garage full of curriculum. And I've tried some for a few weeks, and I'm like, nope, this is not working.
Oh, wow.
And some others, it's like, oh, this is great, and I'll use it for that kid, and then the next kid comes along, and it's like,
They're
this
just
is not working, yes. And I'll even invite my child, depending on their age, to look at it and tell me what they think.
Yeah.
Especially when they reach high school. And my Nathan right now, we're doing that because he's really interested in engineering, and so I'm looking for science and courses that relate to his interest in
Yeah.
engineering. And I'll show him, and he'll tell me, yeah, that looks good, or no, I don't think so. That's not quite what I'm interested
I'm not
in.
excited about it.
Right.
That's one thing I advise is if your kid's not excited about it, it's not going to work. Because
Yeah.
they need to be excited about whatever they're learning. And if you're
Right.
teaching it to them, you need to be excited about it too.
Yeah.
Because if you're not excited about it, you're not going to be their cheerleader as much for it, because they need that sometimes, that it's okay, this is going to be good, we're going to get through this.
Right.
And remember how excited you were when we started? This is just a rough patch. So.
Yeah. Yes. And I realize my kids' learning style are not always matched with my teaching style.
Oh, yes.
So I've had to work through that as well, because I have a son. When it came to math, we had a tough time, and there was so many different curriculums I was going through. I finally said, okay, you are going to finish this curriculum.
I'm not buying anymore.
Right, I'm not buying anymore. And he was in 4th grade, and in 6th grade, he was still working through that curriculum. And I was like, oh, this child. And I have
Of
to
the
go.
same level? Like the
Yes, he
same
was
level
still
2
doing
years
4th grade
later?
math, because I was not buying any curriculum. But it wasn't working for him, and it took going to a homeschool conference, and I sat in a workshop, and I think it was called The Keeper of the Keys. And this mom just shared the fact that our children's learning is kind of, it's something we have to unlock. And we have to find a key to unlock it for them. And it's their job to tell us if it's working or not, the curriculum. And I took that to heart, and I went home that day and I pulled out his curriculum, and we looked at it and I said, is this working for you? Which, it's been 2 years. It wasn't working. And so I felt so bad, but I was like, we're going to find what works. And I told him those exact words that she shared at the workshop. I said, it's my job to find the key to unlock the math you're learning for math, but it's your job to let me know if it's working, and I'm going to listen. And so we started searching curriculum and looking at different curriculum, and I would take them to different stores, curriculum stores.
Sure.
And we would look at math curriculum, and he finally chose the one that he liked, and it was Life with Fred, or
Life of Fred.
Life of Fred.
Yeah.
I would have never, ever,
my gosh.
ever chose that curriculum, because
I
that's
know.
not how I do math.
Yeah.
And it's like just reading a story.
Yes,
But
they're
while you-
super cute. I would link them below. They are really cute stories. And I have to say, and I think you would agree with me, you read through it and you're like, I don't feel like this is enough.
Right.
I don't feel like this is enough. But I've heard so many success stories with Life of Fred, because kids love them. They love them, and they see how math applies in the real world. And it pulls in other things other than math. It'll pull in a little bit of science, and it'll pull in a little bit of geography, and it pulls little tidbits that are unexpected. But yeah, okay, so sorry.
And I
Life
just
of Fred
remember
is so cute.
it's really suited his personality too.
Yeah.
I think they had little jokes in there and things. But the style was so different from how I would want to learn math and how I wanted to teach math.
Right.
So I was like, "You're sure this is what you want?" He's like, "Yeah," and it was perfect for him.
Yeah.
And he was the type that he could read a book and learn from it.
Yeah.
He didn't have to have someone standing in front of him telling him and explaining. He wanted to read it on his own.
Yeah.
And he went on to do a lot of courses that way. He, for high school, did a lot of CLEPs.
Yeah.
And those are books that you can just study, and you take a test, and if you score high enough, you earn college credit.
You don't even have to take the class.
Right.
You automatically earn the credit, because you know the material by taking the test, have shown that you know the material, so they give you the credit for it.
Yes, and I believe he did college history that way, college economics. He had whatever the max you could take for CLEPs, he did to earn his college credit.
They set the max for him.
Right. There's like a limit, to how many of those you can do. You can't get your college degree just CLEPing every subject. So, but he thrived like that.
Yeah.
And my other two after him, they're like, they couldn't do that. We tried CLEPs, and they're like, I can't sit and read this book and then take a test. I need to have someone in front of me talking to me. And so they had very different styles of learning, but that's how he learned. He liked to read, and he would remember his information that way.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was, yeah.
It's interesting. I was thinking, I wonder if you had not gone that 2 years, if you would have been willing to go with something that was so unlike your teaching style, like Life of Fred.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It took that to help me to see two things. One, my teaching style is not always going to be the way my kids learn. And so I need to be aware of that and not force them to learn the way I prefer to teach. I have to discover how they like to learn. Secondly, it showed me that they have to be involved in this process.
Yeah.
And I need to be open to have that conversation with them and basically show them and give them the tools for learning, which is why I really love classical conversations, because it just explained it so well. That's what learning should be. It should be lifelong, and it should be, this discovery period and enjoyable, and it should involve just being flooded with as much as you can learn about a subject. And then you begin to question and dig deeper, and so just that joy of learning. So I was able to really focus more on that at that point and realize, even though kids are required to fulfill so many units for high school with math and so many units of science, it doesn't always have to be those specific maths and specific sciences that are traditionally recommended. You can fulfill those requirements, but it might be with, like my son, who's interested in engineering. He's really into astronomy. So we may not necessarily do the traditional math, chemistry, and physics. His science may include more astronomy and whatever other science interests he has.
Yeah.
But we have that flexibility because that's where his interests are. And as long as, he meets the credits for, 3 years, 4 years of science in specific fields, then he's good. But that kind of freedom, I don't think I would have really recognized if I hadn't had that experience with my older son with math. So that was good for us. Because now with the other siblings, I'm not so rigid that it's like, no, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have to do this. It's more, let's explore and see.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because I know who you're talking about for engineering.
Yes.
And he is super smart. He is a sharp little tack for sure. When you get into high school and they have specifics that you have to take for high school, are you planning to stick, you have to do biology, you have to do chemistry, or are you going to try and find something that more pulls, engineering into it so that it really hones in more on his focus?
Yes, we plan to do that. We are still using classical conversation, so we're following the curriculum for that. But we're also supplementing. Like this summer, we're doing some things for him, and every now and then there are community events that allow him to go and participate and gain some science experience more in his areas of interest. So I look for those kind of opportunities for him. But for sure his junior and senior year, we're going to focus more on the sciences that colleges would recommend you have if you're going to be an engineering major.
So do you have to follow the California state standard for graduation?
We do. And what we do, again, I'm so bad with like the specific categories. Like you have your physical science, and there are different branches. And under those branches, you'll find physics and the biology and chemistry. But there's also other types of sciences that fulfill those same requirements. So we look at those, and he definitely wants to still do physics and chemistry because as an engineer those are going to come in handy, but there's some additional ones that he wants to take. So when he's picking his electives, he's probably going to be picking more science courses than, say your photography class or something like that. He'll have more science. But I've done different things with my other kids. The one that wasn't so keen on math, we, whatever the minimal math was, for him it was algebra 2, that's all we did. I wasn't expecting him to do any trigonometry, calculus, and definitely out. But this young man, he was really interested in economics. So interesting. Yeah.
So he went on to study math.
Yeah, well, it's the way he said it. He liked to look at the behavior of how people manage their money.
Sure.
And so that intrigued him. So he was very much interested in economics for that reason. Now, all the math that came along with it,
Sure.
not so exciting, but just the behavior. And
So he was more interested in the psychology of it than he was the numbers
Exactly.
portion. Interesting.
Yes. So yeah, he went on to, and he chose a business school for college after he transferred from the junior college. He chose a small business school because he wanted to focus on, his goal is to be an entrepreneur. He wants to have his own business eventually. But yeah, he majored in business administration, and there were quite a few, economics class and things like that he had to take, and he did okay in those. Again, he had gotten all the way the basic math, so he was free to just focus in on his interests. So he learned where his strengths were when it came to the math, and yeah, he got by. But yeah, it I think helps when they recognize that there's something they're good at, and even though he struggled with math, he found that he was really good at history, and he was really good at literature and writing, and he was just a reader. He was a strong reader, so he found that strength, and he thrived in that. And where he knew he wasn't, the greatest, he learned to be okay with that, and I learned to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And it took me a while, but
Einstein has a saying that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll grow up believing it's stupid.
oh,
And I love it. I love that too, because it reminds me that everybody, but especially when homeschooling, all kids have an ability to do something. They all have a gift. They all have a talent. And so I think it's so important that we remember that.
Yeah, I definitely believe God has given every kid some kind of talent or gift, and as parents, it's our job to help them discover what that is, and to provide an environment where you can nurture that and instill in them that ability, that gift that they have, they need to use it for good. And I like Dave Ramsey. He encourages you that when you find that talent, that gift, you'll be the cream of the crop, right? Because it's naturally something you're good at, and then you're also content with your career and your job. So work is not always work; it's a pleasure, and you enjoy going to work. And when you're happy like that, you tend to be more committed and more stable, and your income, all these things
kind of more works out.
Right. Yeah. But when you're
So I'm curious, your first four have all graduated, and so I'm curious where did they go after they graduated? Did they?
As I mentioned, our second, Joseph, he went to a small school. It's Menlo College.
Okay.
So it's in the Bay Area, and it's.
You said it was a small business school?
Yes. Our focus is really on business. It was perfect for him because he works better in a small setting. Yeah. So that's where he chose to go. Our oldest, Lydia, and our third son, Isaiah, they attended Pepperdine. Okay. And Lydia actually went to USF for her master's, so she has her master's degree. And that's where our fourth son, Elijah, he was accepted and attended USF.
Did you have any problems once they were applying for college? Did you have any problems with schools having concerns because they were homeschooling, or they come from a homeschool education?
No, actually, I can't think of any situation, and it may be because they also took classes at the junior college, so they had on their transcript college courses, and I think that had something to do with it, us not having a problem being homeschooled, because those courses demonstrated that these are students who can handle college level courses. Yeah. And those grades, they had, decent grades from the college, so that might have been it. Because of course, when your mom is giving you your grade, people will assume she bumps it up. My kids will tell you it's opposite with me. I would give them C's because they weren't cooperative. And it's like, what does that have to do with my schooling? It's like, I'm the teacher, I get to decide, and if you're giving me a hard time, that's part of your grade. But yeah, so I think because they had, someone not mom give me them grades, it helped them out.
Yeah. What are your goals now that you've graduated for? What is your goals for your final four?
So one thing my husband and I are even more committed to is reminding our children that college isn't the only option for you when you graduate, that there are trade schools. Our son Joseph, he actually joined the reserves, so he's in the Army Reserves, and so that definitely is an option for them to pursue. And depending on their talents and skill, they may be ready to just work and gain experience through, again, the trades and pursuing that. Because I think my husband and I fell into that traditional, you graduate from high school and you go to college, and so on. But we notice some of our kids, their interests and talents may not require that they do that. And certainly with the cost of education today, and that's an area I wish we had spent more time with our kids. College is very expensive, and we certainly couldn't afford, to pay for college for 4 years with some of the tuition. So we always encourage them to do the junior college and then transfer, because then you save, that expense there. But even for my daughter right now, Tabitha, she's really interested in baking, and so she's considering being a pastry chef. Yes. So pastry chef. You don't have to go to Pepperdine. The pastry chef.
No, you do not.
So that's what we're more open now with our Final Four to say, let's really figure out what you want to do, and we're not just going to say college is the answer. Let's explore what those options are.
Yeah. See, now my heart says, let's travel Europe and taste everything in Europe.
I would love.
Let's call it a field trip.
Right. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. So with our youngest one, we feel like, we're going to have all kinds of educational experiences with her. She'll be the only one at the house for a while. So it's like, we may do some of that.
She's actually going to get all of high school
by
herself, because it's 5 years break. So
wow. I know, it'll be a very different.
That's going to be very different.
And my husband, I won't give away his age, but he'll probably be retired by then. So goodness, she'll have both mom and dad 24/7.
I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if she's going to feel that that's a blessing in high school.
But it'll definitely be different. For
that
sure.
will be. Wow.
But that's one of the joys, I think, of homeschooling.
What are your words of wisdom? What's your little nugget of information or nugget of guidance that you'd like to leave with the homeschool community?
Since we started homeschooling, there's a scripture that I share often with myself and with others. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. And I say that prayer often because when we started out homeschooling, we wanted to do this and trust God to see us through, and I wanted to honor God throughout this. And I've tried to not lean on my own understanding, but really, have faith in the Lord. And I think that when you're committing whatever you do as a parent to the Lord and you're trusting Him, in His time, according to His will, it will succeed. Yeah. So along the way, there's been bumps and roads, and we have our ups and downs, and things haven't always gone the way I had hoped. But I think because I was striving to commit the homeschooling to the Lord, He has helped, help guide us through this and maneuver homeschooling. And there were times where I felt, I don't know what I'm doing, and I would pray and just ask the Lord, give me wisdom. And I felt like He always answered and provided a resource, whether it was a conversation or curriculum or a workshop, and just Googling and finding
always
things.
just happened to come up, like the right thing always happened to come up at the right time.
Right.
Something you had never heard of, but it was just the
Yeah.
exactly what you needed.
Exactly. And I think, when you commit it to the Lord and you're trusting in Him, then He will work in different ways. And so I feel like I've been blessed to have a good support group. There's always been, other homeschooling moms and, again, resources for me to look into. So I haven't felt like I'm in this by myself.
Yeah.
I've had other moms and other families in this homeschool journey. And so I think that's important, finding your support, finding those you can network with.
Yeah.
And your kids, can also
I feel like you have to find your clan, because I have found homeschool groups before, and I've attended an event or two, and I just said, these are not my people, it's just, this is not my niche, this is not where I fit. And so then I go out and seek again and see what else.
Right.
And I feel like when you meet that right group, you feel like you have all known each other. You kind of, you get just those warm fuzzies. When you get together, you just feel like, oh, this is where I belong. This is the group that is going to help me seek and guide me. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So I think that's really important.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I would say, I know for me, I was guilty of neglecting myself during this process, and I'm still trying to figure that out, because I think just my personality, I'm all in with my kids, with my husband, with my family, but I've had to learn that I need to take time.
You don't lose yourself in the process.
Yes. Still, continue to nurture your relationships with your friends, and I think that's healthy for our kids to see that, yes, I love you, you're important, and, I love Daddy, but Mommy also has friends, and, I spend time with my friends, and for me, that has been a blessing, because, there are things that they understand that my kids and my husband wouldn't, and so I have someone who can really empathize with me when I'm struggling with something, and will pray with me and encourage me, and just, help me to laugh a bit and loosen up. And I'm a foodie, so it's like, I have a friend who always like, it's time for boba, let's go get some boba. And I was like, I will be there. And then I have another friend who is just always up for, eating, and it's just great. And sometimes the nice thing is you can bring your kid along, because we can't always find that one-on-one, but they're open. Oh, bring your kids. That's
and they don't always have to be homeschool friends.
Exactly. Yes. No. And that's been nice too, that I've still been able to have close friends that we're having different life experiences, but we can still get together and encourage one another. So definitely continue to nurture your relationships with your friends and yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me.
Oh my goodness. If you have any questions that Yvette did not answer, or we left you with any questions, put them in the comments below. We'd be happy to answer them, and I'd be happy to sit here and talk to her all day long and ask her any other questions that you may have. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're able to gain some wisdom and some guidance and some encouragement from our conversation today, and we wish you luck on your homeschool journey. Take care.
Oh, I love you.
Welcome back. My name is Melissa Brannon. Welcome back. My name is Melissa Brannon. Welcome back. My name is Melissa Brannon.